it was several Latinx kids who asked me, "Do you drink chocolate milk? When you drink chocolate milk, does it make you get darker?" And that was the first instance of like being othered by my peers.
Right.
And that feeling has stuck with me since then and has shaped the ways in which I educate that community about me. But I also realize that much of their impressions of me and my blackness as a child and ultimately as a man was shaped by someone else or something else. And I cannot take responsibility for those influences, nor is it my job. My name is Tyree Boyd Pates. I am a public historian and museum curator based here in Los Angeles. I grew up in Koreatown, which is a small segment of Los Angeles, my entire life, and my passions and come in various forms of activism, whether it be mentorship, political education, or larger focuses on the youth. And so that's what I do, and currently work at the Archer Museum in Griffith Park. Being a child of Koreatown, but also being an African American child in Koreatown was a very unique experience that continues to inform the work that I do and the communities that I engage with. I was 4 years old when the 92 uprisings occurred here in LA, and I remember the aftershock or the after effects of what it meant to be a Black child and have a Black body in this area of town. Naturally, there was increased racial profiling and also racial discrimination because of narratives surrounding my community, but also there were really important moments of engagement that I think have shaped the ways in which my activism, my activism and the outreach occurs. I think that you can be both culturally competent and culturally sensitive at the same time. And usually, when you have conversations about race in America and the communities that intersect with it, you usually have people dilute those conversations to be more palatable and more, normal to white audiences. But I've learned how to not do that and still be able to maintain the authenticity, the uh, um, the fervent points necessary in order to get certain points across. So that's where I am. And Koreatown has shaped that perspective and my methodology towards my activism, curation, and larger engagement with the Asian community.
So I know that Increase the Volume is very geared towards Gen Z audiences, and your work primarily exists on a very digital space and virtual space.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about how you kind of navigate that?
Being a millennial myself, I have seen the ways in which uh, the internet can democratize the influence of an individual, particularly communities of color. And since my usage of the internet in corporation with my career, I have seen my individual career jump leaps and bounds because of my ability to bring information that often feels top heavy, but I bring it and center in communities of color, i.e., millennials and Gen Xers, Gen Zers who need this information from a reputable source. And so that's my focus, and I do it unapologetically, particularly when it comes to the Black community. But I also do it unapologetically for allies to my community who need to be equipped to better serve us in rooms of privilege that they are currently operate in. I'm speaking directly to rooms of power so that they can listen to communities and demographics who aren't in those rooms. There are far too many corporate boardrooms and C-suites and writers' rooms who say they want to be more diverse and be more inclusive, but that work takes work.
So, going off of that, talking about and speaking with having respect for someone else's culture and
Yeah.
community is, would you say, the first step to approaching difficult conversations?
The first step, that's a good question. It just woke me up too. The first step in addressing, oh, sorry, let me start over. The first step in addressing difficult conversations around race is acknowledgement. And that is pivotal because so many people think they think they're anti-racist, but they actually have a direct investment in racism through their casual day to day. And I often have been talking about and thinking about the difference between being anti-racist or being anti-racist and being anti-black. And although those things parallel or collapse onto one another, I think it's much more important for people to be to address their anti-blackness as while they are addressing their anti-racism or wanting to be anti-racist. And that's crucial. I use a three-tier approach, and I use an acronym called CAR, which is C stands for consideration of privilege. A stands for acknowledgement of how that privilege impacts Black people. And then R stands for repair, repairing the ways in which you benefit from those systems and how you can allocate that privilege in support of Black lives. And so that's how I do it. I tell everyone to jump in their car, jump in their car,
Yeah.
jump in their car every day, and undo and consider, acknowledge, repair, and hopefully that can begin to assist in leveling the playing field for Black people in America.
So you gave a TED Talk about the myth of Black male exceptionalism. I found this so fascinating. Can you please explain to our audiences what it is exactly and some examples of it within our society?
Several years ago, I gave a TED Talk called The Myth of Black Male Exceptionalism, which highlights how there can be one Black male who succeeds very similarly to myself, whether it be vocationally or academically, socially, can shine light and be, the exemplar. But with every exemplar, there's probably 9 other Black men who will never get the opportunity to speak or be provided the platform that one exceptional Black man has received. And I saw that occurring through my ascension in my career. And many would call it meteoric. But I realize now that while it might have been meteoric, there are Black men who are locked out of the museum field. There are Black men who are locked out of the art world. There are Black men who are locked out of academic rooms and the like, right? And just because I've made it doesn't mean that we've all made it.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the event you curated, highlighting the importance of African American women in silent race films.
Yeah.
Amazing, because not only is it like empowering females, but through film, but also kind of giving them the opportunity is the biggest thing. So can you explain a little bit of its significance for the Black community, and how we as modern day filmmakers can draw inspiration from that and put that into our own work today?
I located a very rich piece of cinematic history, which was called race films in the early 1900s, that Black folks used the medium of cinema, particularly Oscar Micheaux and the Lincoln Motion Picture Company, to contend with Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffith. I collaborated with UCLA's Digital Humanities Department. We sourced all of these race films that were noteworthy, but I knew that if Ava DuVernay 100 years later is talking about the need, and April Reign is talking about the need to reform Hollywood systems, I know that there were probably Black people 100 years previous who were saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And that was in fact true. And using them as a template, I decided to hone in even further curatorially and select race films from that period that centered Black heroines in their stories. We have other examples where these women were championing equality in these films and attacking patriarchy. And I just really wanted to give the next generation tools so when they are boycotting Hollywood or trying to give the cases to which Black women should be centered in cinema, these are several films that they can use as examples that are noteworthy and are now in the Library of Congress. So that was Center Stage African American Women in Silent Race Films. And I had such a pleasure doing that at CAM. And I'm so glad that I had support to do so.
How do people prepare themselves to vote intelligently and with the correct facts?
It's so in vogue. It's very crucial for us to have the conversation about why voting is important, both nationally and locally, because for what so many don't know is that voting in November is significant, but voting in midterms elections is more crucial and critical because who you do vote in and who you don't vote for actually makes the difference about the quality of life that you have in your day to day. Because if we don't have folks who reflect us in the chambers and rooms of power, we are going to be in deeper trouble. And we're going to actually be right back here having this conversation in 10 to 15 years. And I'm saying this on panels and conversations. I'm not having this conversation in 10, 15 years. It will be fruitless. And my time will have been wasted if we haven't made gainful strides and gainful change to that direction. And I would, in fact, encourage that audience to reallocate their malaise and activate and catalyze themselves to create political action committees or PACs that reflect them and build out a political infrastructure that supports their gains and agendas. And that takes time, and that's going to be out of a few election cycles. But if that allocation towards political rehabilitation occurs, then I think that audience, particularly Black men, women, and children, can identify with a political candidate that not only reflects them on a phenotypical level, but also their political goals and agendas that can actually be expedient for their futures in this country. Educate, agitate, organize. Educate, agitate, organize. If this generation and subsequent generations follow that template, they can in fact affect change in ways in which previous generations could have only dreamed of.